The knock on my bedroom door was quick and excited. I was folding laundry on my bed, separating Vanessa's delicates from Malik's work clothes, the way I'd been doing every Thursday evening for the past 3 years. "Mom, you awake?" Vanessa's voice was bright, almost giddy. "Come in, baby." She burst through the door, her phone in one hand, already scrolling through something. My daughter was 33 years old, a grown woman with a husband and a career, but in that moment she looked like the little girl who used to run to me with every good grade and small victory. "I got it. The promotion. Senior designer. They just sent the official offer." I set down the shirt I was folding and pulled her into a hug. "That's wonderful, Vanessa. I'm so proud of you." $10,000 raise, Mom, 10,000. We can finally start seriously saving for a house. Finally. The word hung in the air between us. They'd been living here for 3 years, paying me $600 a month in rent while they saved for a house. 3 years of temporary that had become permanent while I cooked their meals, washed their clothes, and wondered when my house would be mine again. But I pushed that thought away. This was Vanessa's moment. My baby girl had worked hard for this promotion. I'm Phyllis Chamberlain, 62 years old, and I spent 35 years as a social worker for Wayne County Child Protective Services. My job was protecting children, intervening in families, making sure people got the help they needed whether they wanted it or not. I retired 2 years ago, burned out and exhausted from seeing the worst of what people could do to their own children. If you're watching this, subscribe and comment where you're watching from, because what I'm about to tell you is a story about a woman who spent her career saving other people's children but couldn't figure out how to let go of her own. About the difference between helping and controlling. And about the moment you realize the people you've been taking care of see you as something other than family. Malik appeared in the doorway behind Vanessa, and I saw the way he looked at her, with pride and love and something that might have been relief. He was 35, a social worker at a family services nonprofit, and I'd never quite forgiven him for using the same professional title I'd earned through 35 years of hard, soul-crushing work. "Congratulations," I said to him, because Vanessa's success was his success too. That's how marriage worked. "Thanks, Phyllis. We're pretty excited." "We're going out to celebrate," Vanessa said, pulling back from the hug. "Some people from work, maybe Rachel and Todd. That new place downtown, the one with the rooftop bar." "Oh, that sounds nice. What time should I be ready?" The pause was brief, maybe half a second, but I caught it, that quick glance between Vanessa and Malik that told me they'd already had a conversation I wasn't part of. "Actually, Mom, it's going to be kind of a late thing. You know, downtown, loud music, the design crowd can be pretty intense." "I don't mind loud music." "I know, but it'll probably go until midnight or later. And it's a Thursday. I know you like to be in bed by 10. She wasn't wrong about my routine. But that wasn't the point. Malik stepped further into the room, his social worker voice coming out. The gentle, reasonable tone he probably used with clients. The one that always made me want to remind him that I'd been doing this work since before he was born. "We thought you might be more comfortable here, Phyllis. There's leftover chicken in the fridge from dinner. And that show you like comes on at 8. Leftover chicken. The show I like. Comfortable here." I looked at them standing in my bedroom doorway, in the house I'd lived in for 33 years, the house my husband Gerald and I had paid off 3 years before he died. I looked at the laundry I was folding for them, the basket of Malik's socks and Vanessa's yoga pants that I'd washed and dried and would put away in their drawers later. Of course, I heard myself say, "You two go have fun. Celebrate Vanessa's big achievement." "You're sure you don't mind?" Vanessa asked, but she was already turning toward the door, already mentally at that rooftop bar with her colleagues and her husband and her new title. "I'm sure." After they left the room, I sat back down on my bed surrounded by their clean clothes. I could hear them in their bedroom down the hall, the one that used to be Vanessa's childhood room, laughing and getting ready for their celebration. Water running in the bathroom, closet doors opening and closing. The sounds of people preparing for a life that didn't include me. Malik's voice drifted down the hall. Should we Uber or drive? Uber. I want to actually enjoy the drinks. More laughter. The click of Vanessa's heels on the hardwood floor Gerald had refinished 5 years before his death. The jingle of car keys being set down on the dresser. I finished folding their laundry in silence. Put Malik's work shirts on hangers the way he liked them. Rolled Vanessa's socks in pairs the way I'd taught her when she was 7 years old. They came downstairs 30 minutes later looking like the successful young couple they were. Vanessa in a black dress I'd never seen before, probably bought for occasions I wasn't invited to. Malik in dark jeans and a button-down shirt, his locks pulled back neatly. We'll probably be back late, Vanessa called out as they headed for the door. Don't wait up. Have fun, I said from the kitchen, where I was already putting away the dinner dishes. Their dinner dishes. From the meal, I'd cooked them after working a full day of retirement errands and household chores. The front door closed. I heard Malik's laugh, muffled by the walls of my own house. Heard Vanessa say something I couldn't make out, her voice bright with happiness and freedom. I walked to the refrigerator and opened it. There was the leftover chicken Malik had mentioned, sitting in a container with my name written on it in Vanessa's handwriting. Like I was a tenant who needed labels to remember what food was mine. Around the chicken was evidence of their life. Malik's expensive yogurt, the kind that cost $2 per container. Vanessa's organic juice, $8 a bottle. The takeout containers from restaurants I'd never been to. The leftovers from dinners I'd cooked that they'd decided weren't worth finishing. I closed the refrigerator door and stood in my kitchen. The kitchen where Gerald and I had raised Vanessa, where we'd had family dinners every night, where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays and ordinary Tuesdays. Now I was standing here alone with a container of leftover chicken, specifically labeled for me, while my daughter celebrated her promotion with everyone except her mother. For 3 years, I'd told myself I was helping them. That's what I'd done my entire career, helped people who needed it. Vanessa and Malik had needed a place to stay when Malik lost his job. They'd needed time to save money. They'd needed support while they built their careers. But standing in that kitchen, I realized something I'd been avoiding for 3 years. They didn't need me anymore. Maybe they never really had. Maybe I just needed to be needed. I didn't eat the leftover chicken. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table and let myself remember how we'd gotten here. How the woman who'd spent 35 years setting boundaries for other families had completely lost them in her own. Gerald died 4 years ago on a Tuesday morning in October. He'd had diabetes for 15 years, managed it well most of the time, but the stroke came out of nowhere. 1 minute he was reading the newspaper at this same table. The next minute he was on the floor and I was screaming for help that came too late. He died in the hospital 3 days later with me holding his hand. Vanessa and Malik had flown in from their apartment across town, sat with us, cried with us. But when it was over, and the funeral was done, and everyone went back to their lives, I was alone in this house for the first time in 38 years. The silence was unbearable. I'd just retired from CPS 6 months before Gerald's stroke. 35 years of removing children from dangerous homes, of interviewing parents who swore they'd change, of writing reports that determined whether families stayed together or got torn apart. I'd seen every variation of human cruelty and neglect. Had nightmares about cases that went wrong, children I couldn't save, families I'd misjudged. Gerald had been my anchor through all of it. When I came home shaking from a particularly bad case, he'd hold me and remind me that I'd done my best. When I obsessed over whether I'd made the right call, he'd walk me through my reasoning until I could sleep. Without him, I drowned in the silence and the memories and the crushing awareness that I'd spent 35 years intervening in other people's lives and now had no idea how to live my own. Vanessa called every day those first few months, visited on weekends, brought groceries and sat with me and tried to fill the space Gerald had left. But she had her own life, her own husband, her own job at the design firm where she was trying to make senior designer. Then Malik lost his job. It was March, about 5 months after Gerald died, budget cuts at the nonprofit where he worked as a family services social worker. The irony wasn't lost on me. Malik did the kind of social work I'd always thought was too soft. Family preservation, keeping kids with their parents even when I would have removed them, believing people could change with the right support. I'd never said it out loud, but I thought his approach was naive, dangerous even. I'd seen too many cases where the social worker believed the parents and the child ended up dead. But he was Vanessa's husband, and when he lost his job, they were suddenly struggling. Their fancy apartment across town cost $1,400 a month. Malik's unemployment was barely covering it. Vanessa's salary as a junior designer wasn't enough for both of them. "Mom," Vanessa had said, standing in this same kitchen on a Sunday afternoon, "we need to talk about something." I knew what was coming, had known from the way she'd been circling around the subject for weeks. "Malik and I are thinking about moving in here, just temporarily. 6 months maybe, until he finds another job, and we can save up some money." Every instinct I'd honed over 35 years in CPS told me this was a bad idea, that enabling adult children never ended well, that temporary arrangements became permanent, that I'd regret this. But I was so lonely. The house was so empty, and Vanessa needed me. "Of course," I'd said. "Stay as long as you need." That was 3 years ago. They'd moved in with 2 suitcases and promises it would be temporary. Malik found a new job within 4 months, a better one actually, with the city's family services department. But by then, they were comfortable, paying me $600 a month in rent, which was half what their apartment had cost, eating my cooking, living in a house where someone else handled the maintenance and the bills and all the small daily tasks of running a household. And I'd enabled every bit of it. I cooked their favorite meals, did their laundry without being asked, cleaned their bathroom and made their bed, and bought groceries with their preferences in mind. I told myself I was helping, that this is what mothers do. But really, I was doing what I'd always done, intervening, managing, making decisions about what people needed, even when they didn't ask for my help. Malik tried to set boundaries. I had to give him credit for that. About a year after they moved in, he'd approached me in the kitchen where I was preparing dinner. "Phyllis, you don't need to cook for us every night. Vanessa and I can handle our own meals. I'm already cooking for myself. It's no trouble to make extra, but we should be contributing more. Maybe we could take turns cooking? You work long hours, both of you. I'm retired. I have the time. Still, we're adults. We should be more self-sufficient. Are you saying you don't like my cooking?" I'd used my CPS voice, the one that made people defensive, that shifted the conversation from their reasonable boundary to their imagined offense. It was manipulation, and I knew it, and I did it anyway. "No, of course not. Your cooking is great. I just meant." "Then let me help. What else am I going to do all day?" And Malik, because he was a family preservation social worker who believed in supporting people rather than confronting them, had backed down. The same pattern repeated with laundry, with cleaning, with all the small ways I'd made myself indispensable. Malik would suggest they could handle something themselves. I'd make it about my feelings or my free time or my need to be useful. He'd retreat. Vanessa never even tried to set boundaries. She'd grown up with me as a mother, knew that arguing with me was exhausting and that giving in was easier, knew that I always believed I knew what was best. I'd raised her the same way I'd approached my CPS cases, with absolute certainty that I could see dangers and solutions that others couldn't, with the assumption that my experience gave me authority over other people's choices. Gerald had balanced that, had gently pushed back when I got too controlling, had reminded me that Vanessa needed space to make her own mistakes. When he died, there was no one left to check my worst instincts. Sitting at the kitchen table, I thought about all the families I'd worked with over 35 years, the parents who couldn't let their children grow up, the grandmothers who undermined the parents' authority, the family members who enabled dysfunction because they couldn't stand the discomfort of setting boundaries. I'd written reports about people exactly like me, had recommended interventions for parents who couldn't separate their own needs from their children's well-being. And now here I was, sitting alone with leftover chicken while my daughter celebrated her success without me. Living in a house with 2 adults I'd reduced to children by doing everything for them, resenting them for taking advantage of help I'd forced on them. The worst part was, I knew better. I'd been trained to recognize these patterns, had spent my entire career identifying unhealthy family dynamics. But knowledge doesn't protect you from your own dysfunction. Sometimes it just makes you better at justifying it. I stood up and walked to Gerald's old office, the room I'd barely touched since he died. His desk was still covered with his paperwork, his tools, his coffee mug with the faded logo from his shop. I pulled out paper and a pen, and I started writing a letter I should have written 3 years ago. The letter took me 2 hours to write. I went through multiple drafts, crossing out sentences that sounded too angry, then too pathetic, then too much like the professional case notes I used to write about other people's families. Finally, I settled on something simple and honest. Vanessa and Malik, I've realized that our current living arrangement isn't working anymore. Not for any of us. I thought I was helping you by letting you stay here, by cooking and cleaning and managing the household. But I've been enabling you to avoid building your own independent life. And I've been using your presence to avoid dealing with my own grief and loneliness. This needs to change. I'll be staying with my sister for a while to give us all some space to think about what comes next. Phyllis. I read it 3 times. It was true, even if it wasn't the whole truth. I'd left out the part about the promotion celebration, about the leftover chicken, about feeling like hired help in my own home. But those details felt petty, and I'd spent enough years writing reports to know that petty details undermined your credibility. I set the letter on the kitchen table and went upstairs to pack. That's when reality hit me. I stood in my bedroom with an empty suitcase on my bed, and I realized I had nowhere to go. My sister lived in Atlanta, had been there for 15 years. I couldn't just show up on her doorstep. My closest friend from work had moved to Florida when she retired. The other colleagues I'd been close with had drifted away after I left CPS. We'd had work friendships, not real ones. I had no one except Vanessa. And if I left this house, where would I go? I sat on the bed next to the empty suitcase and did the math I'd been avoiding for 3 years. My pension was $2,600 a month. The $600 Vanessa and Malik paid in rent brought that to $3,200. My monthly expenses were about $1,800. That left me $1,400 in surplus every month. Enough to live on comfortably, enough to travel occasionally, maintain the house, handle emergencies, but not enough to rent a new place while keeping this house. Not enough to start over in a new city. Not enough to be truly independent. I'd convinced myself I needed their rent money, had used that as justification for why they should stay. But the truth was more complicated. I could afford to live without them financially. I just couldn't afford to live without them emotionally. I unpacked the suitcase slowly, putting my clothes back in the drawers. The letter sat on the kitchen table downstairs, accusing me of the same enabling behavior I'd spent 35 years identifying in other families. But I couldn't just throw it away, couldn't pretend nothing had happened, couldn't keep living like this. So I left it there, on the kitchen table where they'd see it when they came home from their celebration, let them read it, and then we'd have the conversation I should have insisted on 3 years ago. I went to bed around 10:30, my usual time. Lay there listening for the sound of their return, wondering what they'd say when they read the letter. Wondering if Vanessa would come to my room crying, apologizing, promising things would change, or if Malik would knock on my door with his social worker voice, trying to process what I was feeling. I must have fallen asleep because the sound of the front door woke me. I looked at my phone. 1:47 a.m. I heard their voices, muffled laughter, the shuffling sounds of people trying to be quiet and failing. Then I heard Malik's voice, clearer. What's this? Silence. The rustle of paper. Oh God. Vanessa's voice, all the celebration drained out of it. More silence. I imagined them standing in the kitchen reading my words, processing the fact that their comfortable arrangement was being challenged. Then footsteps, coming up the stairs. A soft knock on my bedroom door. Mom? Are you awake? I didn't answer. Let Vanessa stand there in the hallway, uncertain. Let her feel a fraction of the uncertainty I'd been feeling all evening. Mom, we need to talk about this letter. Not tonight, I said, loud enough to be heard through the door. We'll talk in the morning. But Mom. Morning, Vanessa. I heard her whisper something to Malik, heard them retreat to their bedroom, heard the door close, and then muffled conversation I couldn't make out. I lay in my bed, in my house, and felt the weight of what I'd done. I hadn't left, hadn't followed through on the dramatic exit I'd imagined. But I'd started something that couldn't be ignored. Sleep didn't come easy. I kept thinking about all the families I'd worked with where one letter, one confrontation, one moment of honesty had either saved them or destroyed them. I'd never known which way it would go until after it happened. Around 3 a.m., I heard Vanessa crying in their bedroom, heard Malik's low voice, comforting her, and I felt a complicated mix of satisfaction and guilt. Satisfaction that she was finally taking this seriously. Guilt that I'd hurt her on what should have been a celebratory night. But maybe that was the point. Maybe she needed to understand that her celebrations were built on my invisible labor, that her comfortable life came at a cost I was no longer willing to pay. Or maybe I was just a bitter old woman who couldn't stand to see her daughter happy. I'd spent 35 years believing I knew the difference between helping and hurting. Now I wasn't sure I'd ever known it all. Morning came too early. I heard Vanessa and Malik moving around downstairs, trying to be quiet but not succeeding. The coffee maker beeping, cabinet doors opening and closing. Low voices, discussing something I couldn't quite hear. I stayed in my room until 8:30, which was later than usual for me. Normally I'd be up by 6:30, starting breakfast, planning the day's meals. But today I waited. Let them handle their own morning. Let them sit with the discomfort of that letter. When I finally went downstairs, they were both sitting at the kitchen table. Vanessa still in her pajamas, her eyes red from crying or lack of sleep or both. Malik dressed for work in khakis and a button-down, but he'd clearly called in late. My letter sat between them, creased from being folded and unfolded. "Good morning," I said, moving toward the coffee maker. "Mom." Vanessa's voice cracked. "We need to talk about this." "I know." I poured myself coffee, added cream the way I always did, and sat down across from them. "That's why I wrote it." Malik leaned forward, his professional social worker posture fully engaged. "Phyllis, I want to make sure I understand what you're saying here. You feel like we've been taking advantage of your hospitality? I feel like I've been enabling you to avoid growing up, and using you to avoid dealing with my own life." Vanessa flinched. "That's not fair. We're not children. We both have careers, we're married, we pay rent. You pay $600 a month for a room, meals, cleaning services, and laundry. The apartment you used to rent cost $1,400, and you had to cook and clean for yourselves. We offered to pay more," Malik said, multiple times. "You said $600 was fine. Because I wanted you to stay. Because this house felt too empty without you. But that doesn't make it healthy." Vanessa stood up, agitated. "So, what are you saying? You want us out? After 3 years of telling us to take our time, to save money, to not rush into buying a house we couldn't afford? Now suddenly we're a burden?" "You're not a burden. But we've created a situation where none of us are living our real lives. I'm playing house mother instead of figuring out how to be a widow. You're playing house guests instead of building your own home." "We are building our own home," Vanessa said, her voice rising. "Vanessa just got promoted. We're finally in a position to start seriously saving for a down payment, and now you want to kick us out?" I didn't say I was kicking you out. I said things need to change. Malik held up the letter. This says you're leaving. Going to stay with your sister. That sounds like you're kicking yourself out. I felt my face flush. I wrote that last night when I was upset, when I'd been excluded from your celebration and told to eat leftover chicken while you went out with everyone except me. The words came out sharper than I'd intended. More wounded. Vanessa's face crumpled. We didn't exclude you. We thought you wouldn't want to come. It was going to be loud and late and full of people from my work you don't know. You didn't ask. You assumed. Just like you assume I'm fine cooking your meals and washing your clothes and managing this household while you live your lives. You offered to do those things. Vanessa's voice was loud now, frustrated. Every single time I've tried to do my own laundry or cook my own meals, you've told me not to worry about it. You've said you enjoy it, that it gives you something to do. Because I didn't know how to say what I really meant, that I was lonely, that I missed your father, that I didn't know how to be just Phyllis instead of someone's wife or someone's mother or someone's social worker. The honesty made everyone quiet. Malik spoke carefully. Phyllis, I've been trying to set boundaries for 2 years. Every time I suggest we should be more independent, you make it about your feelings. About how you have the time, or how it's no trouble, or how we're insulting you by not accepting your help. I know I did that. So this isn't about us taking advantage. This is about you not being able to let us be adults, just like you couldn't let go of your CPS cases. The comparison stung because it was true. Don't psychoanalyze me. I'm not. I'm just pointing out that you spent 35 years intervening in families, deciding what they needed, making decisions for them, and you've been doing the same thing to us. That's not fair, Vanessa said, defending me even though I didn't deserve it. Mom was helping us. We needed a place to stay. For 6 months, Malik said. That's what we agreed on. It's been 3 years because your mother made it too comfortable to leave. And because every time I suggested moving out, she'd mention how much she needed the rent money, or how empty the house felt, or how happy she was to have us here. I wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, but he wasn't. I've been trying to get us out of here for a year, Malik continued, looking at Vanessa now. I've shown you apartments. I've run the numbers on what we can afford. But every time, you say we should wait a little longer, save a little more, make sure we're really ready, because leaving means hurting your mother. And you can't stand that. That's not true, Vanessa said, but her voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? Last month I found us a perfect 2-bedroom in Ferndale, $1,100 a month, which we can easily afford now. You said we should wait until we had more saved. But we have $18,000 in savings. We've been ready to leave for months. Vanessa looked between us, torn. I didn't want Mom to be alone. Is that so wrong? Dad died 4 years ago and she's been struggling. I thought having us here was helping her. It was helping me avoid, I said quietly, not helping me heal. There's a difference. So what do you want from us? Vanessa's voice was small now, defeated. Do you want us to leave? I thought about that question, really thought about it. I want us to be honest about what this arrangement is. I want to stop pretending I'm doing you a favor when really you've been doing me one. And I want to figure out what happens next, together, instead of everyone just being comfortable and resentful. I'm not resentful, Vanessa said. Yes, you are. You didn't invite me to your celebration because you see me as your landlord, not your mother. And I'm resentful because I've made myself into your landlord and housekeeper instead of finding my own life. Malik checked his watch. I need to get to work. But Phyllis, can we agree to continue this conversation tonight? All of us, calmly, trying to figure out what's actually best instead of what's comfortable. Yes. After he left, Vanessa and I sat in uncomfortable silence. Finally, she spoke. I didn't know you felt excluded about the celebration. I thought I was being considerate, giving you space. I know. But you're right, I should have asked. should have invited you and let you decide. And I should have told you 3 years ago that this arrangement had an expiration date. We'd both failed each other, both enabled a situation that served neither of us well. Vanessa left for work an hour later, her eyes still puffy, her celebration outfit from the night before stuffed into a bag. She kissed my cheek on the way out, something she hadn't done in months, and whispered, "I love you, Mom," in a way that sounded like an apology. After she left, I sat alone in the kitchen with the letter still on the table. I picked it up, read it again, and realized it had done what I'd needed it to do. Not drive them away, but start a conversation we'd all been avoiding. I spent the day doing something I hadn't done in 3 years. Nothing. No cooking their meals, no washing their clothes, no cleaning their bathroom. I sat on the back porch with a book I'd been meaning to read, made myself a sandwich for lunch, let the house exist around me without trying to manage every inch of it. It felt strange, uncomfortable, like wearing shoes that didn't quite fit. Around 3 p.m., my phone rang. Malik's name on the screen. "Phyllis, can we talk? Just you and me, before tonight?" "All right. I'm on my lunch break. Can I come by?" 20 minutes later, Malik sat across from me at the same kitchen table where we'd had our morning confrontation. He'd brought coffee from the shop near his office, handed me one without asking if I wanted it. A peace offering or a habit, I wasn't sure which. "I owe you an apology," he said. "For what?" "For letting this go on so long. I'm a social worker. I'm trained to see unhealthy family dynamics. But it's different when you're living in one." "Yes, it is. When we first moved in, I genuinely thought it was temporary. Vanessa and I talked about 6 months, maybe a year at most. But then it was so comfortable. You cooked these amazing meals. The house was beautiful, the rent was cheap, and Vanessa was happy being close to you. And you weren't happy?" He paused, choosing his words carefully. I was grateful. But I also felt like I was 25 again, living with my mom. Every time I'd suggest we cook dinner or do our own laundry, you'd take it as criticism, and Vanessa would get upset that I was hurting your feelings. So you stopped suggesting it. I stopped pushing. But I never stopped wanting our own space, our own life. A place where I could leave dishes in the sink without feeling judged. Where Vanessa and I could have a fight without worrying you'd hear it through the walls. I hadn't thought about that. How living with your mother-in-law meant never having privacy for your marriage. About a year ago, I started showing Vanessa apartments every weekend, Malik continued. We'd go look at places, and she'd find something wrong with every single one. Too expensive, too small. Bad neighborhood, not the right time. But I knew what was really happening. She couldn't stand the idea of leaving you alone. She told you that? Not directly, but I know my wife. She felt guilty about her father dying, about not being here when it happened, about leaving you alone in this big house with all your grief. Moving out felt like abandoning you. The accuracy hurt. I never said she had to stay because of Gerald. You didn't have to. Every time we'd get close to making a decision about leaving, you'd mention something about the empty house, or how nice it was having family around, or how you'd have to figure out what to do with the extra bedrooms. Little comments that reminded Vanessa you needed her. That's manipulation. Yes, but it's also what parents do when they're scared of being alone. I see it all the time in my work. Parents who can't let their adult children leave, who create reasons for them to stay, who confuse love with control. I wanted to be offended, but he was right. Is that what you think I was doing? Confusing love with control? I think you were doing what you did your whole career, intervening, deciding what people needed, making yourself essential so they couldn't leave. You sound like you've thought about this a lot. I have, because, Phyllis, I respect you. I know you spent 35 years protecting children. I know your work was hard and often thankless. But the skills that made you good at CPS make you terrible at letting go. That's harsh. It's honest. You learned to see danger everywhere, to intervene before problems got worse, to trust your judgment over everyone else's. Those instincts saved children's lives, but they're destroying your relationship with your daughter. I sipped my coffee, let his words settle. What would you have done differently? If you were me? I would have set a hard deadline from the beginning. 6 months. Then we're out, no matter what. I would have encouraged independence instead of making us dependent. And I would have dealt with my own grief instead of using my daughter to fill the hole my husband left. The brutal honesty was painful, but clean, like a surgeon cutting away infection. Why didn't you say any of this before? Because I tried, multiple times. Every conversation turned into you being hurt, or me being ungrateful, or Vanessa stuck in the middle. Eventually, I gave up trying to change the dynamic and just started planning to leave anyway. Does Vanessa know that? She knows I want to move. She doesn't know how seriously I've been planning it. I've been putting money aside separately, enough for first month, last month, and security deposit. I've had my eye on that apartment in Ferndale for weeks, waiting for Vanessa to be ready. And if she's never ready? Malik looked at me directly. Then I'll have to decide if I'm willing to stay in a marriage where my wife can't choose our life together over protecting her mother's feelings. The ultimatum hung between us. Not a threat, just reality. Do you love her? I asked. Completely. But love isn't enough when one person can't set boundaries with their parent. I've watched friends go through this. Marriages that fell apart because someone couldn't separate from their family of origin. I won't let that be us. What do you want from me? I want you to tell Vanessa it's okay to leave, that you'll be fine, that you want her to build her own life, and I want you to mean it. What if I'm not fine? Then you'll figure it out. The same way everyone else does when their children grow up and leave. You'll join groups, make friends, find hobbies, learn to live alone. That's what adults do. I spent 35 years helping other people's families. I don't know how to build my own life. Then maybe it's time to learn. Malik stood up, checked his phone. I need to get back to work. But Phyllis, tonight when we talk, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. We're not your CPS case. You can't fix us because we're not broken. We just need to leave. After he left, I sat with what he'd said. Every instinct I had wanted to argue, to list all the ways I'd helped them, to remind him that I'd given them a place to stay when they needed it, to point out that I'd been a good mother who'd done everything for her daughter. But those were the same justifications I'd heard from parents in my CPS cases, parents who couldn't see that their help was actually harm, who confused sacrifice with love, who believed their children owed them something for all they'd done. I'd written reports about parents like that, recommended interventions, suggested therapy. Now I was one of them. That evening, the three of us sat in the living room instead of the kitchen, a deliberate change of venue, like we were having a formal meeting instead of a family conversation. Vanessa sat on the couch next to Malik, their hands linked. I sat in Gerald's old recliner, the one I'd barely touched since he died. I talked to my sister today, I said, breaking the silence. She invited me to visit for a few weeks. Give us all some space while we figure things out. You don't have to leave your own house, Vanessa said quickly. No, but maybe I need to. For a little while. Malik squeezed Vanessa's hand. Phyllis, before you make any decisions, I think we all need to be honest about what we actually want. Not what we think we should want, what we really want. Okay, I said, you go first. I want Vanessa and me to move into our own place, within the next 2 months. I want to stop paying rent here and start building equity in our own home. I want privacy for our marriage, and I want a relationship with you that isn't tangled up in housing and money and daily logistics. Vanessa's hand tightened on his. She looked at me, her eyes asking permission. Your turn, I said to her. I want to stop feeling guilty all the time. Guilty for wanting my own life. Guilty for leaving you alone. Guilty for being happy when I know you're lonely. I want to be your daughter again instead of your caretaker. The word caretaker stung. I never asked you to take care of me. You didn't have to ask. Every time I tried to leave, you'd remind me how empty the house was, how hard things were since Dad died, how nice it was having family around. It felt like emotional blackmail, even though I don't think you meant it that way. I didn't mean it that way. I know, but that's what it felt like. And I couldn't stand the thought of you being alone, so I stayed. And the longer I stayed, the harder it got to imagine leaving. Malik spoke gently. Vanessa, tell her about the panic attack. Vanessa looked down. Last month, Malik showed me that apartment in Ferndale. It was perfect, affordable, close to both our jobs, beautiful natural light. And I had a panic attack in the parking lot because all I could think about was you sitting alone in this big house. Baby, I'm so sorry. It's not your fault. Or maybe it is. I don't know anymore. The lines got so blurred. You needed us, but you also made us need you. We couldn't function as adults because you handled everything, and every time we tried to do something ourselves, you'd take it over. I felt defensive walls going up. I was trying to help. I know, but Mom, your kind of help makes people helpless. That's what Malik's been trying to tell you. I looked at Malik. Is that what you teach your clients? That help makes people helpless? When it's the wrong kind of help, yes. When you do things for people that they can and should do for themselves, you're not helping. You're enabling dependency. I've read the same textbooks you have. I know the theory. But you can't see it in yourself. That's the problem. You spent 35 years seeing unhealthy family patterns in other people, but you're blind to them in yourself. The accusation made me angry. So what do you want me to do? Apologize for being a mother? For loving my daughter? For not wanting to be alone in the house where my husband died? I want you to recognize that your loneliness isn't Vanessa's responsibility to fix, Malik said. And I want you to let us leave without making it about how much you'll suffer. And what if I do suffer? Then you'll deal with it. People live alone all the time. Widows, widowers, people who never married. They figure it out. They build lives. They find meaning. You can too. I'm 62 years old. I don't know how to start over. You won't be starting over. You'll be starting. For the first time as just Phyllis, not Gerald's wife, not Vanessa's mother, not the CPS worker, just you. Vanessa was crying now. Mom, I love you, but I can't keep sacrificing my marriage to protect your feelings. Malik and I need our own life, and you need to build yours. So you've already decided. You're leaving. We're asking you to let us leave without a war, to support our decision instead of making us feel guilty for it. I thought about what that would mean. Coming home to an empty house every day, cooking for one, no one to talk to over dinner, no sound of Vanessa's laughter or Malik's music, just silence and memories and the crushing awareness that everyone I loved was gone. How long? I asked. 2 months, Malik said. We'll give you 2 months' notice. We'll pay August and September rent. By October 1st, we'll be in our own place. August, September, October, 3 months to prepare for the loneliness I'd been avoiding for 4 years. And what's supposed to change in the next 2 months? We start acting like adults moving out, Vanessa said. We cook our own meals, do our own laundry, clean our own space, and you start figuring out what your life looks like without us. That sounds like you're already gone. No, it sounds like we're practicing for what needs to happen, for all of us. I wanted to argue, to negotiate, to find some compromise where they stayed, but everything changed. But I could see in Vanessa's face that there was no compromise left. What if I can't do this? You can, Malik said. You're one of the strongest people I've ever met. You spent 35 years dealing with families in crisis. You can handle being alone. That's different. Why? Because you were in control? Because you were the helper and not the one who needed help? The question hit its target. My entire identity had been built around being the one who helped, who fixed, who knew what people needed. Now I was the one who needed help, and I didn't know how to be that person. Okay, I heard myself say, 2 months, but I want weekly family dinners. The 3 of us, not me cooking. We take turns or order in, but we stay connected. Deal, Vanessa said immediately. And you help me figure out what to do with your old bedroom. And the guest room. I don't want them to just sit there empty. We can do that. It wasn't what I wanted, but it was what had to happen. The next 2 months were harder than I'd expected, not because Vanessa and Malik were difficult, but because the change forced me to see how much of my identity had been wrapped up in taking care of them. The first week, I woke up at 6:30 like always and started making breakfast before I remembered. They were handling their own meals now. I stood in the kitchen with eggs in my hand and nowhere to put them, feeling useless and unnecessary. Vanessa came down at 7 a.m. with a protein bar and coffee from the maker Malik had set up in their room. She kissed my cheek and headed out without sitting at the table where we used to have breakfast together. The silence was deafening. I tried to fill my days, went to the library and checked out books I never read, watched daytime television that made my brain feel numb, walked around the neighborhood and noticed how many houses had elderly people sitting alone on porches. Was that my future? Waiting on the porch for something to happen? 3 weeks in, Vanessa found me crying in the laundry room. I'd gone to collect their clothes from the hamper they'd always left for me, and the hamper was empty. They were doing their own laundry at the laundromat down the street. "Mom, what's wrong?" "Nothing. I'm fine." "You're crying over an empty laundry basket." "I'm not crying over the laundry. I'm crying because I don't know who I am if I'm not taking care of someone." Vanessa sat down on the floor next to me. "Mom, you spent 35 years taking care of other people's children. When did you stop taking care of yourself?" "I don't know. Somewhere between your father dying and you moving in, I lost track of Phyllis. Then maybe these 2 months are about finding her again. What if there's nothing to find? What if I'm just a mother and a widow and a retired social worker and that's all I've ever been?" "That's not all you are. You used to paint. Remember? You had that whole studio set up in the basement before Dad got sick." I'd forgotten about the painting, had packed it all away when Gerald's illness consumed everything, had never unpacked it after he died because it felt frivolous to create art when I was drowning in grief. That was a long time ago. It was 4 years ago. The supplies are probably still down there. After Vanessa left for work, I went to the basement, found the boxes I'd packed away covered in dust, opened them to find brushes and paints and canvases that had waited patiently for me to remember they existed. I set up a corner of the basement as a small studio, put on music Gerald and I used to listen to, squeezed paint onto a palette, and stared at a blank canvas with no idea what to create. But I put brush to canvas anyway, made marks that meant nothing and everything. Let myself be terrible at something instead of being competent at everything. It wasn't healing, but it was something. Malik found me down there one evening, covered in paint, crying while I worked. "You okay?" "I don't know. I'm painting and crying and I have no idea why." He sat on the basement steps, watching me work. In my training, they told us that grief is a process. But they never mentioned that sometimes it doesn't start until you have space for it. I should have grieved Gerald years ago. You were busy surviving, taking care of Vanessa, taking care of us. Now you have to actually feel it. I don't want to feel it. It hurts too much. I know, but you can't go around it. You have to go through it. Over the next month I painted. Terrible paintings that I'd never show anyone. But the act of creating something, even something ugly, helped. Made the empty house feel less like a tomb and more like a space I was learning to inhabit. Vanessa and Malik found their apartment, the one in Ferndale that Malik had shown her months ago. They signed the lease for October 1st and started packing slowly, methodically, separating their belongings from mine. We had our weekly dinners, ordered pizza or Chinese food, talked about their plans for the new place, about Vanessa's projects at work, about Malik's difficult cases. Normal family conversation that didn't revolve around me managing their lives. It felt strange but better, like we were finding a relationship that wasn't built on dependency. 2 weeks before they were set to move, Vanessa came to me with a request. "Mom, Malik and I have been talking. We want to start trying for a baby after we get settled in the new place." The news hit me with complicated emotions. Joy that they were ready for that step, fear that I'd be further pushed aside, hope that maybe I'd have a grandchild to love. "That's wonderful, baby, but I need to know you'll be okay. I can't start this next chapter if I'm worried about you sitting alone in this house." "I'll be okay," I said, and for the first time, I almost believed it. "Promise me you'll keep painting, and that you'll join something, a book club or a painting class or something. Promise me you won't just sit here waiting for us to visit." "I promise. Because, Mom, I want my kids to know their grandmother, but I want them to know the real you, the strong, creative, independent woman you used to be. Not the version of you that's been drowning in grief and dependency. I don't know if that woman exists anymore. Then become her again, or become someone new. But please, don't just disappear into this empty house." The weekend before they moved, we packed Vanessa's bedroom together, found her old school projects, photos from her childhood, stuffed animals she'd kept for decades. "What do you want me to do with this room after you leave?" I asked. "Whatever you want. It's your house, your space. Make it into whatever brings you joy." Whatever brought me joy, I couldn't remember the last time I'd thought about joy. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the next chapter was about learning what joy looked like when it wasn't tied to taking care of someone else. October 1st came too quickly, and not quickly enough. I woke up to the sound of Malik loading boxes into the U-Haul they'd rented. Vanessa was in her room doing a final check, making sure they hadn't forgotten anything. I made coffee for all of us, a last gesture of the caretaking I was learning to let go of. We sat at the kitchen table one more time, the three of us, and nobody said much. Everything important had already been said. "You know you're welcome any time," I said. "This is still your home." "I know, Mom, but it's your home first. We'll visit, but we'll call first. Give you space." After they left, I stood in the driveway and watched the U-Haul disappear down the street. Vanessa had cried. I hadn't. All my tears had been used up in the 2 months of preparing for this moment. I walked back into the house. It felt different immediately. Bigger, emptier, mine. I walked through each room, touching furniture Gerald and I had picked out together, looking at walls that needed painting, noticing repairs I'd been putting off. The house needed attention, and maybe so did I. The first week alone was the hardest. I'd wake up and forget they were gone, start to call up the stairs to wake Vanessa, then remember. I'd cook dinner and make too much, forgetting I was only feeding myself. I'd hear a sound and think they'd come home, but it was just the house settling, pipes creaking, the sounds of an old house that had always been there but I'd stopped noticing. I cried a lot that first week, not just for Vanessa and Malik leaving, but for Gerald, for the future we'd planned that never happened, for the career I'd given everything to and had nothing to show for the woman I used to be before I'd made my entire identity about taking care of other people. But I also painted terrible, ugly paintings that slowly became less terrible. I joined a community art class at the senior center, felt embarrassed to be among the seniors until I realized I was one of them now. I met women my age who were also learning to be alone, who were also figuring out who they were after their identities as wives and mothers had been stripped away. One woman, Helen, had been widowed 6 years ago. She'd spent the first 3 years doing exactly what I'd done, clinging to her daughter's family, making herself indispensable, avoiding her own grief. "It doesn't work," she told me over coffee after class. "You think if you can just keep busy taking care of other people, you won't have to feel the loss. but it just delays it. And the longer you delay it, the worse it gets. How did you stop? My daughter told me I had to. Said she loved me, but couldn't live her life with me constantly hovering. It hurt like hell, but she was right. Do you regret it? Letting her go? Every day and never. I see her once a month now. We have lunch, talk about real things, enjoy each other's company. It's better than living together and resenting each other. That's what Malik had tried to tell me. That proximity wasn't intimacy. That sometimes distance created better relationships than constant presence. 2 months after they moved out, Vanessa called with news. She was pregnant, 8 weeks along, due in early June. I wanted to tell you in person, but I couldn't wait. Mom, you're going to be a grandmother. I cried. Happy tears this time. Real ones. Can I come over? Vanessa asked. I want to show you the ultrasound picture. Of course. She came an hour later, glowing in a way I'd never seen before. We sat on the couch and looked at the grainy black and white image of a baby the size of a raspberry. I was scared to tell you, Vanessa admitted. Scared you'd use the baby as a reason to be more involved than we're ready for. I won't do that. Promise, eh? I promise. This is your baby, your family. I'll be here when you need me and absent when you don't. I'm learning the difference. Are you happy? Really happy? I'm terrified and thrilled and so grateful you're letting me be part of this. We spent the afternoon talking about names and nursery colors and all the small details of a life not yet born. And for the first time since Gerald died, I felt connected to a future that didn't revolve around my own loss. After Vanessa left, I stood in what used to be her bedroom, the room I'd been avoiding since she moved out. I'd promised her I'd make it into something that brought me joy, but I hadn't figured out what that was yet. Now I knew. A nursery. Not for the baby to live in, but for the baby to visit. A space where I could be a grandmother without being invasive. Where Vanessa could bring my grandchild and know there was a place that welcomed them. I spent the next month painting the room a soft yellow. Put up shelves for books. Found a comfortable rocking chair at an estate sale. Created a space that was ready but not demanding. A room that said you're welcome here but not you need to be here. Christmas came. Vanessa and Malik hosted at their apartment, a small 2-bedroom with mismatched furniture and charm that came from making your own choices. I brought pie and gifts and left after 3 hours because I could see Vanessa was tired. Thank you for not staying too long, she texted me later that night. I know that was hard for you. It was hard. But it was also right. The house felt very quiet when I got home, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like mine. A space I was learning to inhabit as just Phyllis, not Gerald's wife, not Vanessa's mother. Just me. I still had lonely days, still had moments when I'd give anything to have Gerald back, to have Vanessa young and needing me again. But I also had painting and art classes, and a friend named Helen who understood what it was like to rebuild yourself at 62. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was becoming a life I could live. Vanessa's daughter was born on June 12th, a week early, but healthy. They named her Naomi Grace. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. She had Vanessa's nose and Malik's chin, and a cry that could probably be heard 3 blocks away. I met her when she was 2 days old, held her in the hospital room while Vanessa slept and Malik went to get coffee. Felt that surge of love that grandparents talk about, that special bond that comes without the weight of responsibility. She's perfect, I whispered to this tiny person who had no idea yet how complicated families could be. Malik noticed my restraint. That took effort, didn't it? Not jumping in? You have no idea. Thank you for letting us be the parents. It's your job, not mine. I'm still learning where the lines are. You're doing better than you think. On Naomi's first birthday, they threw a party at their apartment. Friends I didn't know, family from Malik's side I'd never met. I brought a cake and a gift and stayed for 2 hours, then left before Naomi's nap time. You don't have to leave, Mom, Vanessa said. You can stay. I know. But Naomi needs her routine, and you need time with Malik's family. I'll see you next week." Driving home, I felt that familiar ache of being on the outside. But it was different now. Not the crushing loneliness of being excluded, but the gentle sadness of appropriate boundaries. They had their life. I had mine. Sometimes those lives overlapped, and that was enough. My house had become truly mine over the past 18 months. Vanessa's old room was a nursery that Naomi visited. The guest room was now my art studio, walls covered with paintings that were slowly getting better. The kitchen was smaller without cooking for 3, but I'd learned to enjoy meals made just for me. Helen and I had coffee every Tuesday. I joined a book club that met on Thursdays. I volunteered at a literacy program on Saturdays, teaching adults to read, using my skills in a way that felt helpful without being controlling. I still missed Gerald every single day, but the grief had changed texture, less sharp, more constant. A weight I'd learned to carry rather than a wound that bled constantly. One evening, my phone rang. Vanessa's name. "Mom, I need help." My old instincts flared immediately. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I just need advice. Naomi won't sleep through the night, and I'm exhausted, and Malik and I keep arguing about sleep training, and I don't know what to do." This was the moment I'd been waiting for, the call for help, the validation that I was needed, the invitation to swoop in and fix everything. "What does your pediatrician say?" I asked instead. "To let her cry it out, but it feels wrong." "Then don't do it. Follow your instincts." "But everyone says." "Everyone isn't Naomi's mother. You are. Trust yourself." Silence on the other end. "That's it? That's your advice? Trust myself?" "You don't need me to solve this, Vanessa. You need me to remind you that you already know what's right for your baby. I thought you'd have all these solutions. Tell me exactly what to do." I could do that, but it wouldn't help you learn to trust yourself as a mother. After we hung up, I sat with what I'd done. I'd given her the hardest gift, the space to figure it out herself. The old Phyllis would have driven over with a detailed plan and taken over. The new Phyllis was learning that sometimes the best help was stepping back. 2 years after Vanessa and Malik moved out, I stood in my backyard on a mild October evening. The trees were changing colors. The house behind me was quiet but not empty. Tomorrow I'd go to my art class. Thursday I'd see the book club. Saturday I'd volunteer. Sunday Vanessa, Malik, and Naomi were coming for dinner. I was 64 years old. A widow, a retired social worker, a mother learning to let her daughter be an adult, a grandmother learning to love without controlling. I thought about that letter I'd written 2 years ago, about the woman who'd felt so invisible, so excluded, so desperate to matter. She'd been right that things needed to change, but she'd been wrong about what the change needed to be. It wasn't about them changing. It was about me changing. Learning that my worth wasn't measured in how much I did for other people, that love didn't require constant presence, that letting go wasn't the same as giving up. My phone buzzed. A text from Vanessa with a photo of Naomi finger painting, covered in blue paint, grinning at the camera. She's going to be an artist like her grandma. I'd spent 35 years protecting other people's children. Now, I was finally learning to let my own child protect herself. And in that letting go, I'd found something I'd been missing my entire life. Myself. Just Phyllis. And that was enough. That is Phyllis Chamberlain's story. Now I want to hear from you. Where are you watching this from? What city? What country? Drop it in the comments below. I love seeing our global community come together over these powerful stories about family boundaries, the difference between helping and controlling, and the impossible balance between being needed and learning to let go. Real question. If you were Phyllis, what would you have done? Would you have let them stay for 3 years? Would you have confronted them sooner about feeling excluded? Or would you have recognized earlier that you were using them to avoid your own grief? Tell me in the comments. Hit that like button if this story made you feel something. Share it if you know someone who struggles to let their adult children be independent, someone whose empty nest feels unbearable. Someone who's learning that love without boundaries isn't really love at all. And subscribe for more raw, real stories about parents who can't let go, adult children caught between loyalty and independence, the cost of making yourself indispensable, and what happens when the person who spent their career helping others has to finally learn to help themselves. Thanks for watching. Sometimes the people excluding you are giving you exactly what you need. Sometimes being needed isn't the same as being loved. Sometimes the skills that made you excellent at your job make you terrible at letting go. And sometimes the hardest thing you'll ever do is learn to be enough all by yourself, without anyone needing you to prove your worth. See you in the next video.